All right, welcome back to Talk Data to Me with myself, Craig Stewart from Dalebrook Media. Number 3 or 4 in the series now that we've been doing on AI, but really looking at the data aspect, the fundamental aspect, all the important things that you need to get into place before you embark on an AI journey in your organization. And joining me from Dubai today, Anjana Wijigunasinghe. I hope I got
That's
that
right.
right as
Yes.
much as I could with my Sri Lankan pronunciation. Anjana is from DP World, a big part of our community in Dubai. Anjana, how are you doing? Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Craig. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, likewise. And Jonah, maybe just quite a few the majority, I guess, of the people that watch these episodes are based in South Africa. I think they'll start to become a bit more familiar with DP World. But just a bit of context, bit of background. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at DP World.
Sure. Happy to. If I talk about the company, we are into supply chain and logistics services provider, from factory floor all the way to the customer's door, end-to-end supply chain and logistics. We manage it through ports and terminals, logistics, whether it's road freight or air, and also that last mile delivery. So that we are present in 6 continents, more than 400 physical locations.
Yeah.
So you could imagine the magnitude of the data points. So I'm attached to the group internal audit function,
Mhm.
which is, of course, looking into the end-to-end operations of the company, looking into what could go wrong or what risks are out there, which could hinder our progress or business objectives. So looking into that, we are a team of about 60 people globally. Looking at a company of over 100,000 employees and 400 locations, you could think it's humanly impossible even to keep an eye on individual business units. So this is where my function comes into play. I'm heading a section called Digital Assurance Solutions. If I put it in a simpler term, my team is a set of data scientists, data analysts, looking into the data side of the operation and giving insights, triggers, flags to our audit team. So you can narrow down rather than trying to shoot in the dark and
Okay.
find
Yeah.
operational issues. There is a systematic approach we take. So that's the role I play. That's how I get related to the data world.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I started off as an auditor, a technical auditor. Now trying to make sense and add value through data analytics. Yes.
Right. Perfect. So proactive problem solver, seeing them before they come
Absolutely.
up. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Awesome. Good stuff. All right, cool. Thank you so much for a bit of background into your role and DP World. So one of the things that we wanted to kick off with when we talked prior to this call was really about the advancements of AI. Now, everybody's kind of immediately, I guess, jumps to generative AI. What would you say are some of the advancements of AI, and what maybe even what do you see coming? What's in the pipeline for AI? It just seems to be moving so quickly.
It is, yes. I mean, in my own personal view, I feel that AI, the terminology is used without the original or the authentic context as well. Everybody likes to link saying, yes, we are an AI enabled or we are using AI. It's advanced algorithms as we know it, large language models, which are trained to do specific functions. There are different ways of whether it's independent or self-driven learning or supervised learning. There are different ways it's going in. And then there are different applications as well in lines of operational activities. So in my organization as well, we do use certain predictive models in terms of market expansion or looking at predicting of volumes, even to the extent of what could be external risks or threats that could come in. So it's a journey. When it comes for implementing AI, I mean, if you look at from a global context, we have not reached that point
Yeah.
where we could 100% rely on it, right? So I see it as a enabler, but then something that we should use with caution because we need to be knowledgeable or confident in terms of how these models were trained. And then the results that are coming out of it, how reliable is it? So this is where your independent sort of judgment experience come into play to see,
Yeah.
because how we learn and give feedback to these models is how it's getting fine-tuned. So I see a lot of potential, but at the same time, I think putting my auditor's hat on, I'll be very cautious as well, not to 100% rely on it, right? You can take in, I mean, even if you see like, the famous models in Gen AI, like ChatGPT coming in, we have seen a lot of examples where even though with so many interactions and prompts coming in, still there is a lot of fine tuning that needs to happen. It's evolving, it's going to
Yeah.
help us, but I want everyone to be a little bit cautious and also dig a little bit deeper into like how these models were trained, what were the test data used, and how comprehensive are they, is it explainable? So there would be different things to look into. This is
Yeah.
my view.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, we're going to get into shortly, the key things that you think people should take into account during model development, but maybe just some feedback perhaps from you. We obviously held our data analytics event in Dubai last week. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it, so I wasn't privy to all the conversations. Without sort of going into too much detail of what each person said, what was the overall sort of sentiment towards AI and generative AI? What is the sort of general level of maturity, would you say, of the companies and the people that are attended? It would be interesting to kind of get a sense of, you kind of always say that it's advancing, it's kind of getting there, but how
True.
far are people actually along in terms of that journey?
Oh, well, that's a tricky one to assess. But okay, let me try to put it into key themes that I sort of took away from the session and the discussions. I think if you're looking at it from a leadership, the strategy, and the need for AI models to come in for our business. In Dubai, yes, I think majority of the financial institutions, banks, is in the forefront, driving it, like, getting into AI assistance as well to handle call centers and all that. So I think they were one of the early adopters coming in. So next comes into the other institutions, maybe government institutions as well. The ministries have taken an active role. I mean, I think we are the only country or maybe the first to have an AI ministry
Yeah.
coming in. And recently there were certain regulations introduced as well to support this. And the government is on an active push to encourage this to get developed, to support the research, things like that. But one common issue or like a root cause from hindering us is going back to the basics of data analytics is the quality of data. So this is something that I heard from everyone, almost
Yeah.
everyone, is that like, it's garbage in, garbage out. So your fundamental building block is that data getting captured at some interface,
Yeah.
which is going to feed into everything, right? So if that is not right, and that is not being given enough attention, then whatever you build on top of it is not going to be successful
Yeah.
and accurate. So I think we'll have to get the basics right. Even though we all, as a data community and data leaders, we have the need, we have the vision, but we need that data.
Yeah.
If data is to be the next oil, it has to be drilled properly, cleansed properly. Otherwise, you will not have a quality
Yeah.
product.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
one more interesting fact is that the data side of the function or the organization should need to have more prominence and spotlight and sponsorship, because they need to have a seat at the table when it comes to discussing of business strategy, even adopting AI strategy and moving forward, because
Yeah.
what's going to enable is the data side. So you need to see, are we ready? And do we have the relevant tools, the maturity, the skill sets? So there's I think, a lot that needs to get addressed in terms of on a business context, where you give a boost to the CDO or CDAO coming in into an equal level like the CBO,
Yeah.
Chief Business Officer. So these are the sentiments that I drew. It's not that we are short of skills. It's not that we're short of the vision and the leadership, but I think we are short in giving that importance, the prominence, and that
Yeah.
push to the data leaders to take it forward and guide
Yeah.
us in this maturity journey.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, it seems quite similar to the South African context, I suppose,
Mm-hmm.
and especially around the data quality
Mm-hmm.
side of things, which was kind of due to come up later in our conversation. But let's maybe chat about it now. You talked about putting a value on the organizational data.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll kind of put a lot more focus on the data quality. You're not going to value something that's very low quality, etc. If it's going to be
True.
on your a line item in your budget or cash flow or balance sheets, etc. You want it to be good, right? Like, how do companies? Because I've heard people say this for quite a few years. It should be on the
Mm-hmm.
balance sheet. It should have value.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to do that, to actually have a line item that is organizational data, whatever it may be, and put a value to it? How do you go about sort of, I guess, coming up to that point?
Well, I think if we are, I mean, broadly thinking, it is yes. But then that depends on your organization, the level of, volumes of transaction and how much you want to make value out of that data, right? And then what is the future looking like for that organization? Just like how we used to drive automation few decades ago, right? What are we
Yeah.
trying to bring back? And then we need to see, what are the critical elements which would give us that edge? It might be the customer details, it might be the commercial details or rates you would have offering to the customer. So we need to identify what sets apart as opposed to maybe let's say attendance or overtime. We need to sort of grade it in a way that what are the critical elements which will give you that edge,
Yeah.
right? And then I think we would have to come up with a mechanism. How are you going to put a price to that? This is something that will evolve over time, because except for bigger companies like maybe Meta or Insta, where there is a huge emphasis and the driving force is data, right?
Yeah.
But rest of the organizations have not adopted this culture, in my view. And even companies, when it comes for mergers or acquisitions, I don't see the chief data officer being in that conversation,
That's a
even
good
to
point.
assess what are you acquiring, what are you merging with, and then whether it's worth. There should be something to look into depending on where you are and why you are acquiring a company. It can be to expand operations or geographical presence, or it is because of the customer base or the knowledge base that is there. Then
Yeah.
we need to have a price to that. So that conversation has to happen. And I think that is a whole stream of evolution that needs to take
Yeah.
place, driven by the data leaders. And having a good handshake and understanding with the business, how much value can we put in? And how much are we going to even negotiate for?
Yeah.
So as of now, I don't have a logic to define it, but
Yeah.
definitely it is a yes thing because we need to. And in my view, if that happens without looking at a merger or acquisition in your own organization, if you look at how critical is this data and how much, what are the critical points that we need to make sure that it's high quality, then that culture also builds up, because it's like, it's like your treasure. You
Yeah.
need to make sure it's safe, it's high quality, all those standards coming in, and it'll help with building that culture around it as well. From and maybe a customer agent capturing the customer information all the way up to the financials. How can we make sure each touch point has the relevant controls, mechanisms to validate it, so that acquiring the data, storing the data, manipulating the data, everything is done in a
Yeah.
proper way, high
Yeah.
quality way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, we cannot leverage off that oil.
No, for sure. Massive culture change piece there for sure.
Yes, true.
Um, all right, cool. Anjana, let's talk a bit about the core thing that we were going to talk about is what are some of the things people should take into account during AI or model development, sort of in general? Because I think there's very often this case where models don't actually get into production. And even getting to that point, sort of pre-production is expensive. There's a lot of resources that go into that. And then
True.
there's sort of this waste because, either the model doesn't get deployed, or it does, but no one really uses it. It doesn't have the functionality or sort of
Yeah.
the results that people want. What are some of the tips that you can give to people listening, of the things that they should take into account when they're developing these models?
I think main thing is that what are you, what is the end goal or end result that you're expecting to achieve? And then how do we get there? These are large language models, and then it all depends on how much training goes in. right? So if I'm looking at the data side of story, one is the quality of the data, how comprehensive are they, and then do they comply to what you want to achieve? If I take a simple, like a popular example is AI models shortlisting applicants,
Yeah.
right? So that means if a company is having company's HR policies should be complied to. Yeah, your diversity and inclusion strategies, what you want to the applicants to be, has to be complied to. So when it comes for the training data, one need to make sure that the training data sets represent adequate examples and numbers of transactions to make sure that the policy can be enforced. So this is one aspect of it. And then how relatable are these data, test data, into the real life scenario? What is the assurance level you have? And a lot of these models are unsupervised learning, which is a black box to
Yeah.
the operational teams. So that is a big hindrance because you don't know how it's behaving. You only know what goes in and comes out. And
Yeah.
what goes in also for the training data, it's humanly impossible for you to go through millions and millions of records.
Yeah.
So this is where explainable AI would play a role in explaining how it functions so that
Yeah.
you have some clarity in your mind. This is how the decision was made. Otherwise, key decisions in an organization done by an unsupervised learning model sort of put you in a risk saying, like, is it reliable? Can I rely on it? Is it aligning with my policy strategies? So I would say it's more around understanding your model, what it intended to, how much of testing has gone into, and then what are those results? Just like testing a software.
Yeah.
What are the different scenarios it is trained on, tested on, and is it giving the expected result? I know 100% is not something that we can look at immediately, but at least is it
Yeah.
to how much of a level is it reliable?
Yeah.
So these are some of the things that I would want to look into. Apart from that, the regulatory side of things. Are they compliant to the regulations, even the test data, if it's on employee details, things like that? Is it compliant to all these regulations across the world? Where can you use it for? Compliance point of view, access controls point of view. So I think these are some of the controls that you need to take into account when you're building an AI model and then also using it. And then the continuous update of it or the
Yeah.
training of it. How frequently is it happening? How is it happening? Is it again done on test data or the live data? And then how do you measure that enhancements, improvements in the decision making? So these are some of the things which we have to find answers as we go along, depending on the model. But from a if we are looking at completely from a business perspective or an end user point of view, these are some of the basic questions any leader should ask is that tell me how this is work. It's simply trying to understand
Yeah.
what's happening, forgetting about the technical jargon and the technicality behind it,
Mm.
because these models are supposed to help the business.
No,
So
for
we
sure.
need to know as business leaders, okay, how did you make that decision?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for me, one of the things around that where I've seen, well, where people have said that they've struggled is that these models almost get created in isolation from the business and the problem it's trying to solve.
True.
And the people developing the model are very good at developing the model, but they maybe don't understand the business context, the types of questions, and you talk about obviously the learning, etc.
True.
What are you doing, or what have you seen to kind of have these models co-created between business and obviously, the data teams
Thank teams.
creating the models to make sure that the quality is there, the answers are, the questions that are being asked are actually getting
Yeah.
answered, so that it actually becomes of value rather than, oh, this is something someone else has created and now dumped on us.
True.
But it doesn't actually fit the purpose for what we need it
True.
for.
I think, yeah, absolutely. You're spot on there. It's a very valid point because if the technical team or the data science team is not very conversant into what the business logic or the use case you're going to be, and not having that firm handshake between the business
Yeah.
team, understanding how things are operating. If you're just limited into the technicality of it, like, how to train the model and then getting some result out of it, where it doesn't have any synchronization or inputs from the business team, obviously then it will not be a success. So that
Yeah.
has to be there from the beginning. That's why I said, like, you need to understand where are you heading with this model, whom are you trying to add value, and what are you trying to do. So that, like, having that solid understanding of where you're going to add value through this model
Yeah.
would be the starting point, and building from there on. And keep your business users or the leaders in that loop, in the conversation, so that they can ask questions. Okay, how are you training? Where are you generating the data? And when you're looking at certain scenarios, majority of the scenarios, you do not have the luxury of having access to this many records of data to train a LLM, right?
Yeah.
So then it's going to be synthetic data. Then is it reliable? How relatable is it to your use case or industry? So these are the things that you have to make sense to the business team, and the business team needs to sort of give the input to the data science team. So that's when you can work out effective model.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, business team needs to understand, or we need to make it clear, it's not an overnight product where you say, okay, we trained it, here you go. It goes on iteration, right? So it will create some frustration, because it's not like putting a software module out, because this is something you need to test, they need to test, they need to feedback. That's when you would develop it to bring it to an acceptable level, where the learning curve would be a little bit higher for a model, depending on the complexity of it. So we need to set, as the data science team, we need to set the expectations right. You're looking at this, don't expect a solution overnight. And the more input they give, the more testing they do, that is which will suit. It's like bringing up a child. It takes a village to bring up a child. You need a village to bring your model to life. Yes.
Good. I like that. Yeah, I think if anybody takes anything away from this, it's about treat the model like a child and make sure that the village is raising it. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, I like that. Yeah, cool. Because I've been talking quite a lot recently about the convergence of business literacy and data literacy. Maybe AI literacy kind of comes into that Venn diagram now, is that, it's important for the data and AI teams to understand business as much as it is important for the business teams to understand, to a degree, data and AI and how the models effectively work. I think obviously very high level, just so that they can say, oh, let's try this, let's try this. If they have no understanding how that model works, it's very hard, I suppose, to give suggestions.
True. It's different than maybe 2 or 3 decades ago, where the business, asked for a software, where you have a workshop, brainstorming, and these are my requirements, and you go and develop it. I want it in green, red, yellow, whatever it is. It's not like that. This is something like, a long-term investment, time, knowledge, and then feedback, right? And then you need to sort of work towards achieving these goals gradually. These things would not happen overnight. And then there will be a lot of challenges. I mean, if I look at a simple analytics exercise, right, getting the right data, getting access to it, making sense out of it takes a lot of time and effort. Right. So from that basic analytics, if you are looking at something like an AI model, it's completely 100,000 times much more complex when it comes to developing it. So that means there are a lot of complexities, a lot of uncertainties we have to manage. And when the model does unsupervised learning, you need to make sure that it is driven towards that end objective we want to. So there's a lot of tweaking, there's a lot of testing we will have to do as we go along. So I think, like you said, having that awareness, education to the business users is critical, and them understanding the complexities and the challenges around it and their role in it. So that is very critical. Like I said, if it's a call center agent who's capturing certain customer information, raising that awareness, building that data-driven culture involves that person as well, because he's capturing the customer data, right? Which would be used for some model to develop an advanced LLM, right? So if he or she captures it incorrect, or it's not stored properly, then obviously you're feeding in garbage to your model. So I think the culture is holistic as well. Business can lead that. That will help. So that it becomes a family affair than only a data science affair, if that makes sense. Yeah,
perfect. No, I love the direction that this has taken. I've actually just thought about a good title for the conversation as well, which is excellent. Anjana, we're running out of time. Maybe just finally and briefly, what role does the internal auditor play in all of this? Obviously, this is your world, this is your environment, so you've got a very good lens on it. How do other companies, other parts of the business, I guess, work with internal audit to understand the models and the risks and all these other bits and pieces that go into it? They might just forge ahead without thinking about some of the other practicalities.
True. So, being in internal audit, I wear two hats. One is I'm a data consumer. So
Yeah.
we are consuming data, like I said, like, analytics to make sense, sort of help our work, narrowing down to risk areas, the insights, the trends, patterns of the business, which is going to help drive our audits of verification of internal policies, compliance, etc. The other side is looking into the controls in place to safeguard our data when we are creating the data, when we are
Yeah.
storing the data, when we are extracting or sort of manipulating it for different reporting to build models, things like that. So we would be looking at what controls should be there. Is it effective? What can be enhanced? And then also looking at things like the governance, compliance requirements. Are we compliant to it? Access controls. If you bring in something like GDPR into the picture, how is the data getting masked? Controls. So looking at the holistic internal control, sorry, internal control structure as well. So that is
Yeah.
the other side of looking into the data side of things. The internal controls from a holistic point of view, both internal and external risk coming in. Externally, cybersecurity. This is something that we are looking into
Massive.
because you're
Yeah.
talking about in a digital space. So there's a huge emphasis and a risk externally as well as internally. So we are looking into all these aspects. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Big job. Having to
Yes.
look after
Not the
everything.
easier one. Yes.
Awesome. Well, Anjana, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. It's been really valuable. I've certainly, in the nearly decade that I've been doing this, haven't thought about raising a model like a child, and it takes a village. So it definitely put a new thought in my head that I'm definitely going to use, and I'll definitely reference you as we have these conversations more. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Craig. Enjoy the conversation.
Thank you very
All
much.
right.
Good to
Take
chat
care.
to you.
Right.
Okay.
Bye
Bye.
bye.